Roy Jubraj, Chief Strategy and Transformation Officer at esure. We've been on a sort of 3-4 year journey. We're probably in our last year of our transformation program. We're literally re-platforming the whole business. So new tech, new operating model, new strategy, essentially driving to a digital-first, cloud-native solution end-to-end. So I've got lots of scars over the last couple of years in terms of what we've had to go through, but we've also got some really good news stories. So hopefully we'll get into that a little bit. I'll turn it over to my panel to introduce themselves.
And my name is Chantana Kenprakamroy. I'm the CEO and founder of Tapley, an InsurTech company based here in London, and we provide technology solutions for the insurance industry. In the UK, we are fully licensed by the FCA, so we sell insurance to the public as well.
Hello, Tarun Kohli, Managing Director and Head of Group Delivery Services for Swiss Re, the global reinsurer. I also wear another hat of being the chairman of Swiss Re Solutions Limited. This is the legal entity that we set up 18 months ago to diversify our revenue stream. Ex-CTO for Prudential. I was there in Proof for 5.5 years. Before that, 10 years at BP driving digital transformation. Another foot in the startup ecosystem, net and board member for Mishipay, which is a retail payment startup. I was also executive board of advisor for Puppet, the DevOps company. That's me.
Good morning, still. Hi, Tim Hardcastle, Chief Exec and co-founder of Instander. Formerly CIO of an insurance company, Hiscox, some few years ago. Instander is now one of the UK's leading tech firms, InsurTech. And I think philosophically, I'm a twin brother of Roy, because we talk about cloud native digital first earlier on. So hopefully you'll get some repartee as we go through the conversation this morning.
That's great. Thank you very much for being here this morning. Looking forward to the plethora of experience that will come through. For those who would like to submit questions, can you please go into the app? There's an icon on the top left. If you click the icon, submit your questions, that'd be great. We'll try to take some of those questions as we go through the discussions, if that's okay. Thank you very much. Hopefully we'll drive some decent engagement. I'm going to start off, if it's okay, on how we think about considerations around technology ecosystems. And I mentioned ecosystems purposely because there's never one piece of technology that we need to implement to essentially drive value in the whole insurance value chain. So what are some of the considerations around technology ecosystems that will drive improved performances for insurers in meeting their customers' needs in medium to long term? And so think about platforms, architecture, events, configuration versus customization. If we can take that through, that'd be great. Tim, would you like to get us started? Is that all right?
Sure, yeah. So when we... Hello? Testing. When we think about ecosystem, or when I think about ecosystems, I think maybe it will help. There's two types. I think there's what I would call enabling ecosystems, which are more the technology set, of which we are one of those, right? And an example of an ecosystem in the enabling context is globally, if you look at it, 50% of the world's compute infrastructure is run on AWS or Microsoft Azure now. I know there's Google Cloud, but within each of those, there are ecosystems. So, for example, within Microsoft Azure, there's I think there's something in the region of 2 million applications inside Azure. And each of those applications can interact, and you can dovetail into them. And so there's a whole world of enabling technology, and it's on a scale that no single corporate of any kind can match, right? The Microsoft Azure, for example, just to give you another stat, it's interesting, there's about 1 billion active users or accounts within Azure. So you've got these ecosystems of technologies which are useful and available to insurers. And then you've got suppliers like us, technology suppliers, trying to accelerate and help those enabling systems. We've got our own marketplace of applications. We have about 300 that sit behind Instander that allow you to tap into, whether it's, analytics and so on. So you've got these enabling ecosystems which are readily available for any insurer, and that are a price point, and they are rich in their features and functions. And then you've got other ecosystems which I think about, which are more to do with retail, like delivering a service or something of value to the consumer or to the business. And there are many examples of those. And I think when I think about where ecosystems are going, McKinsey, for example, wrote a report, I think, saying that by 2025, 30% of the world's economic trade, so that's about $30 trillion, will be transacted through some form of service-orientated retail ecosystem. So to think that your business is not going to be impacted or conducted, or you should not be a participant in an ecosystem, you really are going to have your head in the sand. I think the fantastic thing is that you've got the enabling capabilities, as I said, and then you've got the service retail side as well. And I think many insurers are trying to find ways to either orchestrate or tap into retail-based ecosystem, which I think is really exciting.
That's great. Jananta?
Yes. I think I come from the not only the technology provider standpoint, but also the user of the technology. So if I have to pick kind of two main key considerations, broadly, I would say the implementations and adaptations of emerging technology and the use of data analytics and customer-centric designs. So these would be kind of, key considerations from my part in terms of building the technology ecosystems. But then if you look at, like some of the architecture, data, configuration versus customizations, so we talked the last first. Configuration versus customization, I would say, depending on the type of business that you go for. If we're talking about, kind of low value premiums, we can, or micro insurances, for example, then configurations would be more suitable because then you can have, kind of straight through processing, slightly lower admin costs, staff costs, and then higher churn, more profitable. On the other hand, if you are in a more specialist product line and you need bespoke a functionality in order to cater for your, bespoke process, then obviously the customization would be down. But the marrow between the two is the best way. From the data standpoint, real time it has to be. With the exploitation of digital data, we've got more digital data today than we ever have, like prior to COVID. So a lot of companies are now using digital data daily, and the enhancement and advancement of AI has become increasingly fast. And with some of the AI chatbot, like for example, ChatGPT, it shows you how capable the AI technology is today. And I reckon in the next 12 to 18 months, you see a completely different arena from the risk management, insurance risk management, the whole underwriting, the whole claims process could, this technology could transform the way we see insurance offering the insurance products.
That's great. Tarun?
So I think the key thing, when we talk about the future of platforms and ecosystems, the key thing is, what is the business problem we are trying to solve? Is it around efficiency, or call it digitize the core, or is it about growth enablement? And that's where no single company can do it alone. And therefore, if you are really targeting whether a linear growth business, which is generally the service business, or an exponential growth business, which will come from your platform business, you have to strike the right ecosystem partnerships. We have got several examples where, for example, with IKEA, we co-created a product called Hemseeker so that people can actually take insurance of furnishing as they're buying stuff. And the whole embedded insurance, is a very good example of how the partnerships can play a role. Let's be honest, buying an insurance is never pleasant process. You cannot really compete the thrill of buying a car and taking it for a test drive, than to buy the insurance for the car, which you actually need. And therefore, how do you then solve the problem of making the customer experience very, very seamless? Similarly, we've recently launched our risk and data services. So, the sustainability compass as a solution can enable corporates, risk managers to take control of their climate related risk. And we have an example of a defense company that is kind of, looking into their physical assets and then using that solution to understand the impact of climate risk over a 10, 15, 20 horizon. Or the supply chain resilience solution where we equip the corporate supply chain risk managers to really uncover the top vulnerabilities across their supply chain network. And again, we have several examples, cable company trying to manage the single source supply risk. So I think that the point is really looking for the business problem rather than a solution trying to find the problem, which we see so often, and then striking the right partnerships to co-create and be in a fast mode.
That's great. Thank you very much. We've actually got a question that's come through, which I think is relevant to the risk assessment activity. How can tech help insurers respond to the demand for insurance for digital assets? Taran, do you want to?
Yes. So I think one theme that's going on is to create a digital twin. And I know, the technologies are evolving very fast. Metaverse is kind of, one such theme, which I'm sure in future is going to be very relevant to the insurance, reinsurance industries. And if I just, look into the Horizon 3, you have got several use cases there. You already see a lot of retail presence in the metaverses. Most of the insurance, reinsurance companies are currently using the technology for their immersive digital workplace collaboration solution, which is, I would say, industry agnostic. But then if you extrapolate that to Horizon 2, Horizon 3, then you get into, and supply chain is a good example. Can you actually have a digital twin? And can you use that for specialized applications in underwriting to do the risk assessment? You can then take it further for Horizon 3 to say, will those digital assets in the metaverse will need to be insured themselves? So again, I think the pace of technology is evolving, very fast, and clearly sometimes, the immediate reaction could be, is it relevant to a particular industry? I strongly believe the successful organizations of futures will be the digital businesses. They won't be retail companies or automotive companies or insurance companies. They will be companies that have transformed their business model into a digital business.
That's great. Thank you. All right, we'll get started with the next question, which I think was actually quite prevalent in all three of the first discussion that we had. How do we see the evolution of data, insights, AI being applied to improving customer experience, automation, and better propositions for the next generation of insurance products in the market? I'm going to start with Jananta, if that's okay. Is that all right?
I think insurance industry rely heavily on data. So having more data can only mean good things. And I think from the usage of data perspective, this is a huge opportunity for insurance who want to tap into the kind of underserved market, like the gig workers, who are currently not properly insured by insurance company for XYZ reason. And one of the things is probably the fact that it's so difficult to get an appropriate risk assessment for like micro businesses because the data is lacking. But I think in the next coming year, we will have far more data about this group of business, and the kind of bespoke, offering flexible insurance policy should come naturally when we have that data set, I think. So this is like the more like a product development and emerging technology that go hand in hand. Yes.
That's great. I mean, I think we're seeing quite a bit around how the construct of embedded insurance to the next level, sort of embedded insurance 2.0, where data is being leveraged, it's embedded into the service that's there. We see folks like Tesla and others are essentially trying to take that to the next level. So I guess, Tim, it would be quite interesting around the ecosystem conversation you were having before, which I think sort of data is prevalent in terms of those ecosystems being quite effective. Do you see that evolving as well?
I am staggered when I talk to companies in insurance that want to do some really exciting, innovative things, and we have conversations about the technology that they're using, and some of them are using applications that were designed 20, 25 years ago, and they are the market leaders, right? And what staggers me is you can't get the data out. I'm getting some nods in the audience. I mean, just reflect on that for a second, right? Because the fundamental premise for me about increasing personalization for customers, giving propositions that they really want, is underneath the hood, you need to have technology that is by design interoperable, and by design is ready and primed for data exchange, right? Because without those things, you can't interact or build or be part of an ecosystem, right? Unless you've got those two fundamental design principles, interoperability and data exchange. And so therefore, of course, I would say this, and you can maybe argue that, but any modern technology has been designed to do that. And therefore, that's why I resonated with your comments earlier, Roy, is because when you think about where the future's going and where you need to be, you need to have that speed and agility, and we were talking about this earlier, to be able to personalize your propositions, whether it's through your own ecosystem or part of somebody else's ecosystem. And that technology enablement is critical. Now, you touched on AI as well. I mean, in the space of, I think if you look at the history of the rapid evolution of technology, I'm not saying technology is the answer. It's not. That's why I said at the beginning, we are part of an enabling capability, right? But that enabling capability is going at such a faster rate that if you're stuck on legacy that has not got interoperability and data exchange as its capability, then you're going to be even further behind, right? Because let's just look at some of the progress, just 1 minute. I've got this stat in my head. I hope I haven't misquoted it. Facebook, I think, took 4 years to get to 100 million users, right? If I get the right one, I think Google took a year. ChatGPT, 2 months, right? So you think about some of the pace of technology evolution and change. It's going at an accelerating rate. And so I think that's genuinely exciting. It's a really fundamentally opportunity for insurers and MGAs to leverage this technology. But you've got to get yourselves onto the right architecture. I know that will resonate with you, Roy, because that's what esure's been doing. Otherwise, you're going to be, the pace of this is happening so quickly, and the opportunities you've got in front of you are enormous to increase revenue and reduce your costs. But unless you get onto the right architecture and environment, then you're going to be left behind, I'm afraid.
I completely agree. Darren?
So I think big data and analytics, I think, is now fairly mature. And whether you see the use cases of fraud detection or optimizing claims or experience studies, I think as long as you can have the right architecture, have the right plug and play API-able configuration, I think that's fairly mature. I think data ingestion, especially for the structured, I think is fairly mature. I think for unstructured, the technology is evolving very fast, and there you see the use cases of, you get all these submissions in different formats, and therefore, how can you get the right insights? Now, on the AI side, my take is, narrow AI is fairly mature. RPA is fairly mature. We've got Intelligent Automation Center, which is kind of one of the units in my department, and the teams have been really automating the core business processes very, very successfully. I think the challenge there is how do you quantify the benefits, and how do you make sure that the freed up capacity can be rightly, deployed or optimized. Generative AI, and I totally agree. I think the hype about ChatGPT is very, very different, and a lot of my team members ask me about, is this the same like the blockchain? I think it's very, very different this time, and my strong take is I think this is clearly in the radar of all tech players. I think the startup world will move faster than the tech giants, is my take. We have already started to see insurance-specific products of the large language model. And I think that is something which, as incumbents, we have got a couple of exploratory projects that are going on as to, again, what's the business problem this can solve.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, sorry, go ahead.
I just want to kind of add to Tarun and Tim's point as well about, building the architect for the technology ecosystems. It's not just the technology, but also the business side. I think you will see a lot of consolidations as well, because with ecosystems, is apart from the fact that, the data sharing perspective, but the businesses have to actually come together. So the ability to build like one single powerful system that could cater for all businesses and cater for all users, it takes a lot of manpower. And I think there is a huge opportunity for collaboration here, because like Tim say, all of the new InsurTech companies that start today, it would be API enabled, it would be cloud-based, it would be ready to integrate and collaborate with other platforms. So that's the whole idea. And the idea of one single provider be able to do all of this in the next 10 years is hard. Whereas if you have, all these InsurTechs collaborate, we can get this, kind of a mega giant technology that everyone can use much faster to the market. So in the next coming year, collaboration would be key, I think.
I think we're pretty good at collaboration. I think, if you look at the early stages of fintech movement, it was sort of competition with the incumbents, specifically in the banking sector. I think in the InsurTech space, I think there's actually quite healthy, constructive collaboration going on. However, there's still a lot of noise out there. So, I absolutely resonate with your points, but, for someone like ourselves, where, we're really wanting to use the tech to drive business value, we're really trying to use data in everything that we do and the insights in everything that we do. But how do you find the right collaborators, and how do you actually sift through the noise? Because that's a big challenge for folks like ourselves in terms of how we want to make sure that we're partnering with the right folks. Can we start to have that conversation? Tim, do you want to take a crack at that?
Yeah, you're right. It's well, look, let's just take a step back briefly and recognize that both the fintech, insurtech wave has been overall a force for good. It's been now I'm talking about the technology side of it. I don't subscribe to the view that there's been one or two companies that have set themselves up as alternative insurers and they've raised a lot of money, and then I think it's been proved that they're not what they cracked out to say to be. But from the technology side, I think insurtech and fintech as a whole have been trying to help the industry do better, and it's the best way to incubate ideas is inside a technology environment where you're stressed about getting revenue and you're trying to raise your funding. It's a very pressure cooker effect, sorry. And so I think that's been a force for good. But at the same time, it's noisy because, you've got people building businesses and they may make claims that aren't quite true because they're trying to win a deal, right? And they're trying to secure revenue. So I can see from an industry standpoint that it's quite difficult to discern who's got something that's of value and who hasn't, because it's a very noisy environment. I think where we are right now, however, is we've gone through 1, 2, maybe even 3 iterations of waves of change within InsurTech, and so you're now seeing the kind of the emergence of this set of scaled up InsurTech, fintech businesses that have raised money, they've got large clients, they've got numbers of presence in different countries, and then the industry can look at them and say, well, actually, they are the ones that have, in a kind of Darwinism type way, forced their way through and survived. And so, I'm pleased to say, obviously, we're one of them, and there are a number of them around that stand proud, if you like. I think the other dimension you can look at, of course, is there are SIs that are now aligning themselves to InsurTech companies. They're offering digital ecosystems. We're partnered with a couple of SIs because they're bringing to the market digital ecosystems, because they realize that although you've done it, but you've done it in a different way, the rip out and replace model is antiquated, too expensive, too much risk, too much cost. So digital ecosystems are the better one, and therefore the SIs are bringing to market curated, validated, checked, audited proposition. So you can look at your SIs like EY and Deloitte and say, who are you bringing to, and that's a faster way. And then you've got, of course, all the industry analysts. You've got Cellen, you've got people like that and others that are, again, reviewing. And so there are plenty of ways that you can look around the landscape and figure out who's the right company to partner with. But then you've got a whole bunch of subtleties, right, around, you know, the culture and the values of the company you're partnering with, and inevitably you've got this large, small player dynamic, which is sometimes difficult to navigate for a smaller player. But I think there's lots of ways that you can get into really be surgical about your choice of partner. I think just the relationship dynamic is often the bit that gets missed.
Yep. No, I agree. Jananta?
I think apart from the culture aspect, the business results. So what we are looking to build and want to do, whether that align with the objective of our clients, I think, and whether we can add a lot more value than, you know, providing technology. So that's how we kind of work out who is the best person, and usually would be in our line of business or expertise. We focus on the micro SME and freelancer or the gig economy. So we would do anything that are slightly less traditional and less standardized, usually, and that's how we can, you know, focus. And if our partner see this as their market opportunity and they want to go into it, we are probably one of the best partner that they could partner with.
Great. Tarun?
I think you're spot on. You know, how do you filter the signal from the noise? You know, just in the last 7 days on generative AI, you know, my understanding is there are 200 products that have been released. The week before was about 125. So how do you find from this crowded space, you know, what are a few gems that are relevant to you? I will answer this in two parts. I think the first is a business view. And I'm a strong believer, you know, that we don't need digital strategy for the business. That was very relevant, you know, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And I know most of the companies have got their digital strategy department, and they have got very thick kind of, you know, digital strategy that they refresh on an annual basis. What we need is a business strategy for a digital world. And both are quite, you know, there's a paradigm shift, you know. Digital strategy for the business puts tech into an order taker mode, and refreshing business strategy for a digital world, you know, transforms or pushes you into making your business a digital business. And that's where, you know, if I go back to my Pru days, you know, we had a big initiative about optimizing claims management. And then we said, you know, how do we go about preventing claims? And then the thought process was completely different. We then struck partnership with Babylon at that time. Babylon was relatively fairly in its early days. And then we rolled out the AI doctor into 13, you know, countries in Asia. So quite a paradigm shift. The second part is, like I've said, you know, how do you filter the signal from the noise? And that's where I think, you know, here in Swiss Re, we have established a prototype lab. We encourage people to do a hot house over a 48-hour period. So you take a technology that you feel is going to be relevant, and then you test it out, and we sanction money for prototype, but then we try to time box it so that it can be tested with an early client. And if it works, then you scale it up. If it doesn't work, move on. And then there's an element of a cultural change. How do you then celebrate failure? How do you take lessons learned? How do you, you know, keep on motivating the team to move on to the next one? And, you know, that's easier said than done. But, you know, there's a muscle that from an incumbent perspective you need to build so that you can leverage the new technologies that are going to just increase in their you know, coming to the horizon.
No, I completely agree. I mean, we did something quite similar. We created there's not a piece of software in our stack that we hadn't had a sort of sandbox environment where we not only looked at the use cases that we're solving for in the here and the now, but actually how could that piece of kit extend where we want it to get to in the next 2 to 3 years in terms of how we actually think about how it's going to evolve. So I wholly prescribe to that. I think it's an immensely useful thing to do. We've got a couple of questions that I'd like to touch on, if that's okay, coming from the audience. To what extent, to the conversation we've just had around ecosystems, around the right players and collaborators, to the whole data usage, how do you think the regulator's role will come into the mix? What can they do differently? What can they do more of? how do we actually get them on side in terms of what we're trying to do as a collective? Tarun, do you want to start that?
Yeah, so I think it's not us versus them, right? They are part of the mix in making sure that the industry can leverage these technologies, but at the same time make sure that they can mitigate the risk, they can address the risk, and the whole big data and analytics, not doing in the right way can open a Pandora's box of problems. And therefore, how do you make sure that you've got the right security settings up? I think 5-7 years ago it was the same thing about cloud, right? And then it started with the banking sector where regulators encouraged, but they also wanted to make sure that there are kind of guardrails, there is proper governance, and therefore I think the current collaboration that I'm seeing between industry and regulators, absolutely, I think it's a step in a positive direction.
Great. Tim?
I agree.
Do you bring the regulator in-house to you guys to talk about what you
Well,
guys do?
I think I agree with Taran. The regulator's essential, and it's we don't think about the industry operating effectively without there being the right governance and regulation in it. Otherwise, we'd have a Wild West kind of setup. Consumers would suffer, etc. So, I think the regulator is absolutely essential. I think the challenge is that, as I said earlier, the pace of the technology change and evolution is outstripping by a factor of multiple times the ability of the regulator to react and respond. And I think that's my concern, which is that if you just take AI as an example and look at what's happening on deepfake in terms of that, the EU's already taken a position which is going to be more stringent on AI and deepfakes than the UK is. But in both legislative environments, regulatory environments, the regulatory models and ability to legislate or protect ultimately consumers, I think is unfortunately not by design going to be fast enough to keep up with the technology change that we're seeing. So I mean, again, you've read about the petition. I think Elon Musk is part of it to delay for 6 months the advance on AI, because I think there's a underlying piece there to say, let's give ourselves a pause because we need to have some time to reflect and think about the regulatory environment that we want to be putting around it. And have people responded to that? No, they haven't. I mean, the Google CEO was on record yesterday, or they're being interviewed saying, it's all guns blazing, firing ahead. And I think he was interviewed and said, but we still don't understand our own AI algorithms. Did you get that news bit? I mean, he doesn't even understand what he's creating. It's a very, very opportunistic, but at the same time, it's got a heavy amount of risk part of it. And I hope the regulator thinks about its own business model with respect to how it's going to react and respond. Because I agree with Taran, it's for the interest of consumers and the players in the industry that we do have in lockstep regulation with some of these technology capabilities that are emerging.
Yeah, and I think it's also, I think it's also keeping them in the camp. It's a collaborative process, and I actually think there's a lot of misinterpretation of the regulation in spirit of looking after the customer, when in reality, actually, there's probably simpler ways to do things to meet the needs across both the provider of the service and the user of the service. So I think that will take effect. There's a couple of other questions here. Jananta, I'm going to start with you, if you don't mind. There's a lot of discussions around customer experience, customer loyalty being driven by moments that matter and stand out for those customers. Can the panel give some examples of insurers that really settle urgent claims real time by embedded payments? It's quite specific, but.
I am fortunate in the way that my line of business hasn't been that many claims. But I can give you some of my experience during COVID. Anyway, there were a couple of claims that came out of the business disruptions. And I think, but to the point that, a lot of the claims that were raised were not paid out because it's just simply not covered by the policy, the whole kind of pandemic and access to the building and so on and so on. So to that end, I guess, it was very difficult for our claim adjuster or our TPA to handle claims, because we have never been in the situation where majority of staff started to work from home, and many of them don't have access to the system at that point in time. So I think it took like nearly 6-7 months before we hear back from the claims team about any of our claim, and we have higher than usual noise from our customer who's been there waiting for the response, which, you know, like we have to kind of explain to them that this is like, this pandemic have never happened before, so it's impact us in the way that we haven't expect. Normally it wouldn't take this long, so we need to really explain that to the customer. Yes, so yes.
Taryn?
So very relevant question. I think we came up with a product for insurers on the flight delay insurance, where the proposition was that within 30 minutes the money will be automatically transferred into your account, and it's out in the public domain. But I think the important message is that we definitely need to use these technologies to make the customer experience seamless in the moments that matter, and claims is one of those very critical moments for the insurance industry.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that we've seen is actually the basics still come into play, because there's still a lot of fraudulent activities that go on in the moments that matter. So we tend to build a lot of insights in terms of the full sales process integrated to when the claim happens. But we're also building the infrastructure and the pipes to ensure that actually if it's all clear and all the data and all the evidence are there, we try to pay out quite quickly. So I think the tech is there for us.
Well, I think it goes back to one of your earlier points that we think about the opportunities we have with data. I mean, we've got a client that is I don't think I can say the name yet, that is using an Apple Watch to monitor health activity. Now, that's a good example, and it's linked to the insurance premium, and so that good behavior, if you're fit, your premium goes down. But it's a good example of where you're getting real-time data on health, right? And therefore, it informs you so much more clearly, almost dynamically, about any claims that are going to be made, because you've got all that history data, right, that you can refer to say, well, there was obviously a trend that was leading to that health incident. And I think one of the challenges that we have with other insurance products is that your interaction points at worst are annual, right? And you have no understanding of the behavior of that asset or that person necessarily. And then when you come to make the claim, you're into, well, almost a defensive, I'm going to check that there's not a fraudulent one. Whereas if you've got the data available and it's real time and you've got that. Now, that's not possible on every product, but it's an example of where in the future, I think people will be more willing to have that data exchange for benefit of their experience. And I think when you go even further, you're then getting into more proactivity around prevention and advice on how to behave or operate in a way that's safe and secure. And you're preventing the claim, which everyone wants, because no one wants the payout, right? There is another example where we're not part of it, but they're in the audience. I don't think I can use their name, but there is a payment card company globally that has aligned itself to cities in the US, and they have a mechanism where they can charge a card and allow people that are in disaster scenarios to go and buy essential goods necessary. I need blankets because I haven't got a home. And that's a really fantastic example of where they're changing the model around how claims payouts should happen, because they're realigning it to the needs of the person in that moment. And there isn't a question about, is this legitimate and everything else. It's a mechanism through a payment process to enable that person to get just themselves healthy and secure and a bed for the night, so to speak. So I think there are models that we're seeing. One, driven by data, you can inform your claims function much more better. And there's the example I gave. There's lots more like that. I think the claims experience is the moment of truth, if you like, with the customer. And I think there's so much more that can be done there to improve that experience. And we're heading that way, I believe.
It's good. Some great examples there. We've actually got a lot of questions that are coming through, so I'm going to try to get through most of them. What's the growth predictions for industrial IoT market? Taryn, do you want to take a crack at that?
I've got a stat if you need it.
Yeah, that'd be good.
So, we have an exploratory project going on about industrial manufacturing 4.0, but as a reinsurer, it's very, very early stages.
Tim,
On the stat,
let's go first.
75 billion connected devices by 2025 is one of the predictions I've got. I think the annual growth rate is expected to be something in the region of 25%. So 75 billion times 25%. I think, I mean, we'll all recognize and agree that it's running very, very fast. I think again, with the advance in machine learning tools and insights, because the data's pouring in, you need tools and tool sets to be able to analyze that data and do something with it and then react, because I think, you then got to discern the meaningful events that you need to respond to and the ones that you don't. And so I think the models they're improving as well around the machine learning. So, again, the tools are there or they're becoming available. So I'm really excited about where that's going to take the opportunities again for insurers to be much more present, much more dynamic, much more part of the consumer and customer's experience.
Jananta?
Do you want my comment around IoT?
Yeah.
Yes.
If you have, yeah.
Yes. I think IoT is already kind of integrated part of the insurance industry anyway. If you look at, some of the business that use this in life and health, we have a lot of that. Telematics in motor space, for example. And I think as the IoT become more available and people are using it, I think this would be one of the area where insurance could really tap into the data that it's generating. I am excited about the whole data that come out of IoT generally, and how we can best use of it, especially for personalized and more bespoke insurance products.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're seeing, not only are we seeing IoT data being more available, but we're actually seeing intermediaries actually making product use of that data. So insurers and customers can actually get better value out of that data. So
I can
think
just
it's gonna be
add
quite
there,
exciting, right?
one is IoT, the other is IIoT, which is the industrial IoT. And that's where, it could have a potential for the insurance industry, because if you've got very large machinery, then can you put the industrial IoT so that you can then have a preventative maintenance or the self-healing? And I think that could have a potential.
I agree. We're not going to be able to get through all the questions, but there's one quite interesting one here, and we're swiftly running out of time. It's amazing when we're having some good fun here. It goes quite quickly. I think this would be a relevant question. 30 seconds each, if you don't mind. Is Amazon building the greatest threat to us all, given the data, the tech, and the global reach in terms of what they're doing? And we know that they're getting swiftly into the insurance marketplace because they're building their own marketplace in that space. We know that they've got loads of data. We know they've got technology that's in the security of their homes now that will essentially drive the whole IoT construct in terms of how we think about risk assessments and claims and et cetera. What are your thoughts on that? Taryn, do you want to start?
Yeah, I would say, within our innovation hub, we have got a number of projects running with all tech players. And I think the future is not about competition. The future is about competition. How do you collaborate and compete with the players at the same time? And that's where the secret sauce for the organizations, the successful organizations, will be finding out that zones where you can effectively collaborate. And for a number of these players, they've got fantastic distribution channels. And where do you compete? Where do you collaborate?
Right. Jananta?
I think for my line of business, I can say that it's safe for now. And the reason for that, we are in, commercial liability space where I think Amazon data probably wouldn't affect us to the same extent, even if they have lots of information about micro SME, for example, but they're actually using those data to be able to price risk, and particularly on demand and personalized level, you would need an InsurTech and insurance expert. So we still feel like we are still okay. Yes.
I've got one last question for everybody. How do you see the insurance industry and its ability to attract sufficient diversity of experience and knowledge when it comes to options available for not only solutionalizing the business, but also thinking about how you run the business in a quite sort of evolving environment. Tim?
That's when we. I'm sure I might get told off for this, but on our risk register at the board, should I be talking about our risk register report? Anyway, I don't mind showing. It's basically our number one risk is talent retention and management, right? Here we are, fast growing technology business, and with a I'd like to think a good culture and everything else, but we're really struggling to find great talent. Once we have talent in the business, we're very, very active. We have really active programs to keep people stimulated, grow them, help them grow, take on more responsibilities and so on. But I think there is a challenge, and if we're challenged, perhaps arguably some companies that maybe not seen quite as fast growing and as attractive in that sense, then I think the industry faces this question really about how do you bring people in, firstly, and then secondly, can you give them an environment that is stimulating? And for me, a stimulating environment is there is plenty of change, there's new opportunities, there's innovation, they've got the tools to work with to do that. And I think for some of the insurance incumbents, they're not able to provide those tools, unless you're using standard, of course. But I mean, I would say that. But I mean, no, even we are struggling. So I think it is really a challenge for the industry. Actually, I don't have the answer for it. I wish I did, because otherwise it wouldn't be number one on my risk register.
Jananta, quickly, yeah.
We kind of, open our new generation of InsurTech, which is working remotely, 100%. And with that mean that we can, or that's, more opportunity for us to source candidate from all over the world. So it's not, you don't have to be UK based to work for Tapley now. So that kind of solved the recruitment perspective. And the retentions, I think, down to the culture. And it's very, very difficult to build a diverse team, because you need diverse manager. You need someone who actually understand different cultures and be able to manage it and be able to kind of get everyone to collaborate, even though they may not speak the same language and have the same culture and don't see things in the same perspective. But on the other hand, if you manage this properly, the outcome or the output that you get from your team should be far greater than recruiting people with similar background and similar mindset. Yes.
Great.
I will just quickly add, it's a challenge, right? One of the way we are tackling is, and increasingly what we're finding, senior leaders who are joining want to join for the organization that has got a purpose. Our purpose is to make the world more resilient, and we acted as a shock absorber for society, like other insurers, whether that was COVID, whether that was impact because of war on Ukraine, or the NatCat events. So I think what we are finding, people who are attracted towards the purpose, and they want to solve business problems. They want to use technology to solve a business problem.
It's great. Thank you very much for your time today, our great panelist. And thank you for your attention and your engagement. I really appreciate it. Take care. Have a good day.